You're watching News at Prime. Let's get into this conversation now. All witnesses who have testified before the Madlanga Commission this week have agreed that Police Minister Senzo Mchunu's instruction to disband the KwaZulu-Natal Political Killings Task Team was misguided. The inquiry heard claims that Mchunu directly interfered with the duties of the National Police Commissioner, while others allege he acted to protect the interests of criminal syndicates by dissolving the unit. Let's discuss this now. And we are joined by the Dullah Omar Institute's Africa Criminal Justice Reform Senior Lecturer, Dr. Jean Redpath, UNISA Senior Policing Lecturer, Dr. Mpho Matlala, and we're also joined by New South Institute Public Service Program Reform Program Head, that's Yoliswa. Makhasi. To all of my guests, good evening to you, and thank you very much for making time for this conversation. Can I start with this question around the possibility that the chief evidence leader of this inquiry, Advocate Terry Mutau, could possibly, and it's with a big question mark, could possibly step away from the commission? The understanding now, Dr. Jean Redpath, you'll be my first one to respond to this, is that there are consultations in the background with him to stop him exiting. What do you think this will mean for the commission if he does go?
Well, I don't think it's crucial to the commission. What would be more interesting would be the reasons. If he's finding a reason to recuse himself from the proceedings, in other words, if he finds himself conflicted and not able to carry out his duties objectively, then that would be a legitimate reason to move away from the commission.
Yeah. Dr. Matlala, we don't know those reasons, as Dr. Redpath points out. However, are you concerned if indeed he does go? This commission already has had some delays in starting its work, and this could potentially set them back again. At least that is the commentary around it.
Thank you, Xoli. I'm very, very concerned. Whatever the reasons are, my main worry is if they point to a lack of integrity, and I don't speak lightly of integrity. I'm talking about doing the right thing even when no one is looking. If they point out to lack of integrity, then they would have really compromised his moral authority to hold power. In a commission such as this, no one under a dark cloud, South Africa can never accept somebody under a dark cloud leading evidence in this commission. And indeed, there will be, if he were to exit for whatever reasons, there would be a little bit of a delay because an additional evidence leader then would have to acclimatize or acquaint themselves with what has already transpired through reading of transcripts, and that can take a bit of time. We have seen it in other cases that it does somewhat delay the proceedings.
Yeah. Ms. Makhasi, you have the last word on this, and I take full advantage of the fact that you also were a government official not too long ago. If it is for integrity reasons, if and when we do learn about his reasons, how might government try to fix this? Because this is so important, an exercise, particularly for integrity.
Yeah, thank you, Xoli. I think firstly that it's important that we don't speculate on the matter because we don't know yet what his reasons are, whether it's for integrity purposes or simply withdrawal, for whatever reasons he decides to withdraw. My view is that this is something that the Department of Justice together with the Commission should really have prepared for such cases. So from a plan B, from a risk management point of view, they should have prepared for that possibility that any of the evidence leaders or any of the people who are occupying a critical role in the commission may not be available for this or that reason. So let's wait and see how it turns out. I don't want to speculate at the time, but if of course there are integrity issues and there may be the reason for him to get off the team, I think that it's honorable. It would be honorable for him to do that, because those integrity issues may probably, if not attended, drag him and the commission at a later stage.
Good advice there. We'll have to wait to understand the reasons, if indeed he does go. But as I say, consultations still underway, at least based on the reporting around this today. Okay, so let's get into the conversation of what we heard this past week. And I'm going to kick off that conversation with a soundbite from the General Fani Masemula himself, who questions who briefed the police minister ahead of him issuing a letter that the political killings task team be disbanded. Let's just take a listen to what he told the commission.
With regard to that, in the letter where the minister says, after assessment, the team is not adding value to SAPS or to the country. I can't recall the exact wording. I'm sure for one to come to that conclusion, yes, you must have done assessment. And when you do assessment, obviously you will talk to people that are dealing with the matter at hand. In this case is the PKTT. So in order for one to have had briefing of the PKTT, the minister would have definitely have briefing from General Mkonazi, or have briefing from Dumisani Kumalo, or had briefing from myself. To an extent, maybe 30% maybe should have had briefing from Lieutenant General Libya, because Lieutenant General Libya, at some point, he headed the National Steering Committee. But it didn't go far. He left it. So he wouldn't know the complete work of the team. There is no way he will know it. So then to come to that conclusion without having this briefing.
Let's start with you, Dr. Jean Redpath. The minister simply did not consult, and instead he issues a letter for the immediate disbandment of the political killings task team. Is this an indictment on the minister?
Well, I actually differ somewhat in my interpretation of the law from General van Rooyen. The Constitution says that the National Commissioner must control and manage the police service subject to the directions of the minister. Now, it has become, it's part of the democratic understanding that stops short of what is called operational interference. So in other words, a minister can't say, bring a case against this person or stop a case against that person. But when we look at the annexures to Commissioner Masemula's testimony, we see detailed information on just how much money was spent on the political killings task team and how much of resources were redirected from, for example, police stations in KwaZulu-Natal. So to give an example, the first 6 months, over and above the salaries of the people in the task team, so this is not including salaries, cost 49 million, of which 500,000 rand was for laundry. So that immediately raises red flags for me in terms of what value are we getting for these resources. In addition, 30 vehicles that were supposed to be used at police stations in KwaZulu-Natal were redirected to the political killings task team. Now, I did a back of the envelope calculation for the 6 years of the commission, including the salaries, and it comes to something like R500 million. Now, it is precisely the job of a minister to talk about priorities and policy. Now, I agree there should have been some discussion, some consultation, but it is the job of a minister to ensure that the policies of this government are implemented. And if the priorities of this government have changed, then they must be reflected in how the police carry out their work. To spend R500 million, roughly, over 6 years on cases that only involve politically connected people, when that means that resources are redirected from ordinary victims of crime in KwaZulu-Natal. Furthermore, over this time period when the Political Killings Task Team was in operation, we actually see the number of murders in KwaZulu-Natal increase, not decrease. And by the end of the term, by July 2021, we also had the Political Killings Task Team comprised intelligence people, investigators, and a large fraction of combat people, which is also surprising. You would have expected with them working on the ground, investigating, they would have had some forewarning of the July 2021 riots. But nothing. No action during the July 2020 riots. Those 300 and something murders that arose out of those riots do not seem to be part of their mandate. So if one were the minister, just on the basis of the authorizations for the financing, there could be a good argument that he was obliged to intervene. Now, I'm not saying that there may not be a requirement to consult and to have had a conversation with all the parties involved, but on the face of it, it does seem that things are not as clear-cut as just straight interference, which is how it's currently being presented in the Commission. And I'm sure when we hear evidence later on in the Commission, we might begin to hear the other side of the story. This is not a clear-cut case. There are no clear good guys and bad guys. It seems to be a factional battle between the more MK-aligned parts of the ANC and the more Ramaphosa-aligned parts of the ANC. And this is what is playing out in our criminal justice system, which is very, very concerning for the future of our criminal justice system.
Dr. Jean Redpath, you make a good presentation about the resources drainer that this PKTT was, but at the same time, you highlight this ambiguity. There's no clear-cut case as to what exactly is going on here and whether Mchunu consulted or not. So this is what I'm going to do, Dr. Mpho Matlala. We're going to take a break, but as we take that break, please have this in mind, because I want to talk to the resources drainer part of what Dr. Jean Redpath argues. And I want for the team to set up a PKK bite. And I think it is from Ms. Harrison, the NPA head in KwaZulu-Natal. But we'll have all of that after this short break. Let's take a breather. You're watching News at Prime. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the week that was in the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. And we stopped at the point where Dr. Jean Redpath had made a case that the Political Killings Task Team was somewhat of a resources drainer. And indeed, if you read the Sunday Time papers today, and you get that sense that there was much more money that started being required in order to sustain the existence of this team. But the Police Commissioner, Fani Masemula, seemed intent that if the team is producing results, money should not be an issue here. Let's take a listen to Elaine Harrison. She's the head of the NPA in KwaZulu-Natal, and her concerns around the disbandment of this Political Killings Task Team. Let's have a listen.
In 2026, there will be local government elections. We are aware that all elections are often preceded by violent political activity. This consists of murder, attempted murder, assault, criminal injury, malicious injury to property, etc. being committed. The modus operandi differs in that it may involve members from the same political party against each other or between the different political parties. And the reason I say this is clearly in KwaZulu-Natal, we see that every time that there are elections, this is the norm that happens in KZN. And it was a forewarning that in going towards the next elections, which are going to be in 2026, that we can expect that there'll be some spike of political activity, violence within the province. And I was worried, as I said, I was worried at that stage, and a bit frustrated that no one is coming out to tell me what is the correct picture regarding this letter that had now circulated in the media.
Dr. Mpho Matlala, let's bring you in. There is the worry that we're going into an election. Here is a letter stating that this PKTT is being disbanded, and the worry now is that elections, particularly in KZN, are preceded by violence. Should there have been worry about money, the resources to sustain this team?
Well, we are a very resource-scarce country. Even when a unit such as the PKTT is performing very well, we should always keep accountability on the back of our mind. We cannot say that there are successes, therefore we will let slide of the fact that, as my colleague indicated, I mean, we let slip of doing laundry for 500,000 rands. You need to ask yourself, how much clothing or uniforms have been washed for 500,000 rands? I'm very concerned. I'm sure if you're washing clothing items for the entire population of Tshwane, maybe you can spend 500,000 rands. So, you know, immediately, because I'm not really privy to the annexures, I'm just hearing this from my colleague. 500,000 rands worth of laundry for me would be a red flag. But perhaps the minister will come and highlight us and highlight all these issues. But what I'm worried about is why dissolve the PKTT when the minister was in a position to demand accountability. You know, why crisscross between the mandate, the constitutional mandate in Section 206 and 207, which I'm of the view that that was unlawful. You know, why use another reason? If that be the reason, couldn't the minister have come out very clearly and say, I am dissolving because I'm looking at the utilization of resources, and this does not add up? And perhaps even the minister taking legal counsel himself to say, can I dissolve or can I call for them to come and account what is the best possible way to proceed around this issue?
Ms. Yoliswa Makhasi, let's bring you into the conversation. The relationship between accounting officers, or what would normally refer to as DGs, and the executive heads, those are ministers. Here is the situation. The minister writes to Masemula, who is an accounting officer, to say, dissolve and dissolve immediately. What should have been the steps here from both sides?
Well, thank you, Xoli. I think firstly, I want just to highlight what the National Development Plan, Chapter 13, says about this issue of the political administrative relations, that there is generally in the public service ambiguity in roles and responsibilities of the ministers as well as the roles of the accounting officers. And from the point of the minister's roles in terms of the Public Service Act, I think that historically these roles that should be roles of accounting officers are given to the ministers in terms of the Public Service Act. And I think at the time this was done, there were reasons why it was done like that. However, for the police, South African Police Service legislation, there is an attempt to clarify these roles and responsibilities in the sense that the minister is responsible for policy oversight, leadership, and to provide directives at that particular level. And operational issues remain the responsibility of the National Commissioner. So we have heard what is the interpretation of the National Commissioner and colleagues within administration in respect to what they view as operational responsibilities that they said the minister has interfered. It would also be, I'm quite interested to hear exactly the minister, what drove him to take such a decision and what is his own interpretation of this political oversight mandate and directives. Where does he think it ends? I don't know if at SAPS there's some document that points and unpacks these relations in a much more detailed way so that it's clear where the cutoff is, because to me currently there remains to be ambiguity on the matters. Under normal circumstances, if there's no constrained relations, it should be possible for the minister and the National Commissioner to have a discussion about these matters, for the minister to share the views or the concerns that he has about particular matters like this. But we have heard from the National Commissioner that there were no such engagements, and such a letter was sent to him whilst he was on leave, and it came unexpected. So again, it would be useful to understand what triggered it, but as part of maturity in leadership, I think it's a very key instrument that it should be done. Moving on to the issue around how do you handle such issues, there is a number of, Professor Fikeni earlier on spoke a bit about this, but there's a number of things that can be done. Firstly, the Code of Conduct, the Constitution, and the legislations that they do not allow heads of departments to implement irregular instructions. Once they view an instruction as irregular, you are not forced to implement that irregular instruction as a head of department.
Yeah.
You are required to refer such matters to bodies like the Public Service Commission, and there is a circular that the chairperson of the Public Service Commission spoke about, and it guides you on those matters. He is not the only head of department who might experience that. I think almost all heads of departments experience that. Even when I was a head of department, I experienced those things, but I followed the guidelines that are out there in terms of how you follow those things. You write it down, you advise the minister accordingly, so that if the minister has a different view, even when it's written down, then you know how to take the matter forward, but you have your own paper trail sorted on that matter.
Yeah. Dr. Redpath, there's something interesting that Ms. Makhasi points out, and that is that if there were no strained relations between the minister and the accounting officer, that's General Masemula, it should have been a discussion between the two of them to say, here, Minister, I suspect you are overreaching and perhaps things could have been resolved amicably. But based on the testimony that we have heard from Masemula himself, it appeared that the minister had a trusted person within the police management who was the sender of the messages between Masemula and indeed back to the minister, and that's General Shadrack Sibiya. What do we read into this modus operandi of the minister and how it deals with the police management?
Well, we have to be very clear and very frank that the Zondo Commission found that there was that the police were also captured, and that was particularly the case in crime intelligence. And what we have, the minister is now faced with a police service in which he is not clear who is corrupt and who is not, who is captured and who is not. It's a very difficult situation to be in. Ideally, what we would have is a cooperating national commissioner cooperating with the minister, discussing. Ideally, we would have the minister accounting to Parliament.
Dr. Redpath,
yeah.
Allow me to interrupt you for a moment. I apologize. But Minister Mchunu is new in this post. So
Yes.
how is it that he is unable to pull people who possibly were divided along factional lines and say, I see that there are divisions here, let's try and deal with this, instead of appearing to take sides, which is what at least we have heard from this commission thus far?
So I think what we must also bear in mind, if we look at General Mkwananzi's testimony, almost all of his testimony relates to people who have tried to close the taps on perhaps not corruption, but on unjustified expenditure. For example, the lease of the building in Durban for 3 times its supposed price. And his targets in those cases were the members of parliament who would not let that stay down. So I think we have to be aware that for the minister, it is very difficult because there are vested interests. There are people who are in some ways good and some ways bad. Nothing is black and white. And so in some ways doing a good job, but perhaps in other ways not. And it's a very difficult situation in the light of the factional nature, not only of the ANC, but of the people who have been appointed within the police over the last 10 to 15 years of the state capture period. And we know that crime intelligence in particular still has, that was where more than 300 unjustified appointments took place. And we know that not all of those have been reversed.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very difficult situation with a great deal of vested interests, people with a great deal of power, which they still have as a result of their position. And the minister himself, recently was moved up the NEC list to number 6 after the top 7. And that in itself would have caused some ructions within the ANC and the changing power dynamics within the ANC itself.
Yeah.
So this is not a simple battle between good and bad. It's a factional battle. There are vested interests, and wouldn't be easy for any minister to sort it out.
I have to wind down the conversation, unfortunately, because of time constraints. Dr. Matlala, in a minute, if you can, Dr. Jean Redpath is on to something here, because it's not a pure matter of just policing alone. There are factional political interests here. Is it easy to assume that because of those political interests, the minister may or may not have consulted the interministerial committee itself, which was now responsible for this PKTT? Those would have been his colleagues within cabinet.
Well, Oli, that is what we will find out when the minister comes to testify. But from the testimony that we've had in the week that has gone by, is that there was clearly bad blood. We can see that there is bad blood between Minister Mchunu and Pani Masemola, General Masemola. If you look at the allegation that Sibia was reporting directly to the minister, thus usurping General Masemola's, or usurping the chain of command. Equally, General Masemola also indicated that he had placed General Khumalo to be in charge of the PKTT, and General Khumalo was reporting directly to him, and General Khumalo is supposedly Sibia's subordinate. So there are those contestations, and clearly there are factions within in the space. And then on the other hand, you have General Mkhwanazi saying all of this is wrong, it needs to come out in the open. But we are yet to see if this talks to factional battles within the ruling party itself. But my last word is that if it is factional battles between the ruling party, it is not a far-fetched assertion.
Ms. Makhasi, very briefly, you have the last word. At some point, General Masemola appears to concede that he did give in to an unlawful instruction, although his was to say, I'm going to phase out the PKTT, not closing it down immediately as per the wishes of the minister. You point out at some, in an article, that sometimes it's pure cowardice on the part of the accounting officer that they give in to an instruction, an unlawful instruction. Is that where we are here? Very briefly.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say on the part of General Masemula is that case because I don't know the detail. But the point that I'm raising around this idea of Yobugwala is that there is capability that you can use to deal with these matters. But I know that, and I think also General Masemula did touch to the fact that these issues affect your career at times, and you will find yourself on the streets, especially when your contract in government as a head of department is coming to an end. Remember, there are tenure issues in the sense that heads of departments are appointed for a period of up to 5 years. So as you draw closer to your 5-year term, people generally choose to be safe because they do not want to lose jobs, and some of these people are still quite younger. But for me, I think it's always better to choose integrity over a career because you can always build on your career even if you're outside the public sector. The public sector is not the beginning and the end of you as a professional who is capable, who is competent, who can do their work. So integrity is very important so that you don't find yourself in compromised situations because you were just scared to advise the minister. And if the minister is unable to listen to you, to put it down in writing and to get that legal advice and to escalate properly.
Yoliswa Makhasi, thank you very much indeed for your time. To all of my guests, I cannot mention all of you by name, but thank you so much for your contribution to this important discussion. And we have to end it there.